right. So welcome to Meeting the Leadership Moment. This is a part of the Navigating Change series. I'm Jennifer Epps-Addison, and I have the honor and privilege of moderating this powerful conversation. Today is a really special day for me. We're going to dive deep into the essence of leadership in times of profound change and challenge. I think many of the listeners out there can relate to this moment. I am so thrilled to bring you the voices of resilience, of power, of innovation, of care, joy, and love. Women who are holding our movement with such beauty and grace. We're joined by remarkable leaders who are not just shaping the future, but also really defining what it means to lead with integrity, with courage, with vision, especially in the times that test the very fabric of society. Karundi Williams, Anathea Chino, and Chris Melody Fields Figueredo. Ladies, thank you so much for joining me. So I'm going to dive right in because you are busy, and I'm so grateful that you've given us some of your time. I want to ask you, each of you right now are leading big, powerful, amazing organizations in a time of global crisis, from state violence to COVID to climate catastrophes to war. How do you navigate holding staff, especially directly impacted staff, with the pressures of running an organization that is accountable to partners, to real people struggling every day, to funders, and even boards of directors? How about I kick it to Chris first?
Well, let's just start with the easiest question of all. I mean, it's hard. I want to be honest to folks listening. It hasn't been easy. This is my 5th year leading business, and one of the things I realized in reflection is a year and a half into my leadership was the pandemic, the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and the uprisings and the cataclysm of what has been happening for years with the Black Lives Matter movement, and the economic crisis and climate change, right? And not and still figuring out how to lead a board, how to lead an entire organization. And I think the biggest reflection I have is you got to give yourself grace, because even though there's an expectation of us as leaders to have all the answers, we are human beings going through the same things everybody else is, and we have to give ourselves grace. And we also have to model for our staff the way we want to be, and we want the way we want the world to be, even when those systems and institutions and the world we're trying to build don't exist and are resisting. We still have models. So even those rapid response moments happens, there's tweaks, there's adjustments, but we've had to remain very clear and grounded in our vision and purpose, because ultimately everything that is happening is a distraction to prevent us from getting to that liberated world where we're all free and live in dignity. They're distractions to prevent us to get there. So, it's been really giving myself grace, being radically honest with staff and boards and funders, leading with that vulnerability. And then, the women on this screen have been the people who I've turned to when my well is dry.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Chris. Thank you. Chris, I want to you next. What have you found to be really important and critical in this moment?
I loved everything Chris said, and I second plus a lot of what Chris said. And I think, Chris, you had about a year ahead of me in terms of my leadership when the pandemic struck. I had been sick in the game uh, with the baby. So, I reflect back on that moment, and the thing I reflect on is how quickly I had to grow with to meet the moment. And it I don't have to change it, right? Like, it was really, really difficult to rise to the occasion. But as women of color, I knew I had it in me. I was scared. I was nervous, obviously. But I had to grow really fast. And when you center marginalized communities and directly impacted people, it allows you to lead from a place of humility. It allows you to really tap into your own vulnerability. That's the word I was looking for. I was asked the question is, I believe that strength as a leader is part in my vulnerability to lead with transparency with myself, right? Chris talked about grace. I didn't learn how to extend myself the grace that I was extending to my people, and you need it in this moment. We're expected to show up into organization to execute on their work while their kind was dying in front of them, while COVID was disproportionately impacting the communities they come from. And we're expecting them to show up to work and execute on the work, right? So really, I think the organization really pivoted really quickly in the moment to both extend grace and space and time for my staff and my team to breathe, right? To show up and say, I can show up, and that's okay, right? And I think the other thing I was thinking about when I asked that question is really unapologetic unity, right? In a moment, I think I was, and I know funders listening to this conversation, I had to be in with my founder partners and say, I need more than just a right? And for them to partner with you in a real way it takes strength. It takes I always I tell myself, say it with the chest, right? Say it with the chest, right? Believe what you're saying, say it real and authentic, and be unapologetic about what you need to be able to rise to the occasion. So that's one thing that I figured out in this moment and leading, really centering my people. And then the last thing I would say is what Chris touched on at the end of what she was saying is community. How do we create community around us as leaders to then lean on, right? So our group of EDs of color that really came around to surround us with relationship, right? Relationship and trust. But that community helped us to stay resilient, right? In the moment that we needed that. So just like I didn't learn how to extend grace to myself that I was extending to staff, I still had the support of a community that I could tap into when my well ran dry. Right? When the well went dry, I had this community to fill me up. So I think the three things I would say is leading with vulnerability, really centering the most impacted among us, extending grace, of course, but also having community. And then be unapologetic in asking for what you need and lean on all your partners, including your funder partners, to say, in this moment, I need your financial support, but I also need more than that. How can you partner with me in a real way to do this work in a sustainable way?
That was so powerful. Thank you so much, Karundi. Anathea, I want to come to you now. And, for me, I'm so grateful for you to be a part of this conversation because you work with folks, with a group of women, with, Indigenous people all over this country who often don't get brought in to these conversations and who have been facing the types of crises, right, from, genocide to exclusion from political processes to, exclusion out of the political system. And you've been working on that your entire career. So Tell me a little bit about what does it mean to lead in a moment when the rest of the world is catching up to what your communities have already been facing?
Thank you so much for framing it that way, because that's really the place that I was going, is that there's, in this moment, I feel like that there, at least for me, and what I'm hearing from like my team and our community, is like, and there's something that is a comfort in this collective experience of being able to go through this, because of one of the things that we hear as Indigenous communities is around healing and like moving through truth and reconciliation of the history of the country. And when we talk about that, it is as though you're bringing up old stuff, right? Like we have to be able to get through it to be able to like just continue on. And it's not true. We're going through this collectively together and witnessing what that is like for our relatives, and the interconnectedness of all of the world and our relationship to the universe and all of its elements. And so there's like no one knows the answers in this moment, and so there's like something, there's a conversation to be had that we'll be talking about more about leadership and like what that means for like our movement and like how we are building leaders and what that looks like to be able to support them. But really being able to like, I always say that like we have like a phrase that we use that's called remember the future. And it is really thinking through like having the knowingness of like leadership and survival and like, the fabric of our being, and know what that is like in like our blood and in our bones. But there is a collective experience that is happening right now that is something that and that feels like that I feel as a leader some comfort in knowing that I can count on other people who are all navigating something new. And that we are taking from the teachings and kind of learnings from Indigenous communities around survival and around resilience and around the hope of that we will continue on the other side of that, because we have to be able to believe that there is something through this, through all of this trauma and this stress and everything that is happening right now, is that we have to believe that we shall continue. And so like part of that is like with our team is having open communication around what that means. And it impacts our team in a number of different ways. So like we have taken moments of pause. We do at the beginning of our staff check-ins on a weekly basis. We create space to be able to just have conversation before we get into the work. And it looks like making sure that we have some kindness with ourselves and recognizing, and it's constant kind of like tap into the energy of like what is happening around us, and like recognizing when there are moments when we have to take pause, and we have to think through like when we have to like change the course, or we have to pause where we're going forward in the next step forward. So all of it means that you have a heightened sense of awareness of everything that's happening around you, which can be so tiring, which is again back to what Chris and Karundi said around community, that is just really so valuable, because no one has the answers in this moment, but collectively we have the experience and we have the ability to be able to find comfort in each other, to be able to continue to put one foot in front of the other. It's such an important question to be talking about, because it is a responsibility on leadership like nothing we've ever known before.
Woo! I am so glad that we are recording this conversation, because I know I'm going to be replaying it over and over and over again. All of your words just are so grounding, and I mean, truthfully, so rooted in the way that women of color lead. So I'm so grateful to all of you. Karundi, I want to come to you. The title of this podcast today is Meeting the Leadership Moment, and you work in particular to build political power, to build governing power, to build organizing strength and capacity, right, with communities of color all across this country. What does it, can you tell us more, I guess, about what leadership means when you are trying to expand an often resistant system?
You know, I really appreciate the question. Chris, I think that resonates with me. This is what I do in the moment, is keeping my eye on the North Star, right? How do you, and it's hard, right, to respond in the moment. There's multiple crises all the time, everywhere. and you're trying to build power for communities of color, and you know that that work is not, it's going to take a long time. It's a journey to get to that place. So how, as a leader, do you lead when those are two things that feel a little in conflict, right? Like responding in the moment, doing all these things, and then keeping your eye on the North Star. For me, that's what I do, right? Is how do I always bring us back to focus about where we're heading, right? My work at Repower specifically is about building power in the long term. We believe in 365-day a year organizing, right? And power building. We understand that there's these pivotal moments, like an election, for example, right? In the work that I do, focus on the state level. Federal elections aren't the only thing that's happening. There's a local election every single day, right? And we really focus on building power at the state and local level. So elections in general isn't something that I can react to or respond to and like have that shift our strategy, for example. So really thinking about how do we both respond or not to the multiple crises, right? And there's a pressure, right? So you all just named climate crisis, crisis, Black Lives Matter movement, like there racial justice crisis, LGBTQIA plus folks are being attacked. Like everywhere you look, there are crises disproportionately impacting our community. And so there's always a choice point, right? As a leader for the work that you're doing to figure out how do I respond to this, and this. And that's always a little bit hard to do. And sometimes I have to pause and talk to my staff about, yes, we care about what's happening here. We really do. And we cannot shift our strategy to go and address that particular thing. How do we stay the course, right? So I think for me, it is always being clear about our North Star, always being clear about the time it's going to take for us to get there, right? And partnering with other groups, like the groups that are on this call, that we all, I'm going to pivot a little bit. We all think about our work as a pie. It's like a pie. We all have a slice of the pie. And one of the things that has helped me as a leader in moments like this is being clear about my slice of the pie. What it is that Repower does really, really well, and what do we care about, and how do we focus on that understanding and trusting that our friends and partners have the other slices. Like we all have this thing that we all contribute to building this movement and giving forward momentum to where we're going. So for me, it's always just staying rooted in what it is that we're trying to accomplish, trusting my partners in the movement that they've got this, and whatever else we need in order to support them, that's how we do that, but not pivoting too much. And that feels hard sometimes, right? It feels really hard. And I would say, given that we have a funder audience too, the way funders fund can stress you out a little bit and can make you feel like you have to pivot to go do that work because that's what funders are funding right now. And being honest, and the way my leadership show up is just to be really real and honest about it. Like, no, we're not going to do that. And sometimes making that choice to say that, we're leaving money on the table. Right?
Yeah. If I could just comment on that, like Karundi, like that is so key for leaders. And like we as leaders have to understand a global context, a U.S. political context. We have to understand and aware and be very clear of our role, especially with our staff and funders, of what we play and the utility we play, or the piece of the pie that we play, how we fit into that context. I think that's just so important as leaders to understand, is like, yes, this, and also this, because then you can get easily distracted. So I just wanted to respond to that because it's so key, Karundi, of what you said. Is like, understand and also be clear and direct and focused.
And Jen, you asked the question is what does leadership look like? It is also being able to make difficult choices, right? Being able to make difficult choices and be grounded, rooted, reminded again of what you're here to do and what does it call for in this moment. And in this moment, I believe leadership in this moment calls for bravery, right? Being brave, being courageous. That's the word I was looking for, actually. Being courageous to be able to make those tough decisions. And some of those decisions doesn't feel popular in the moment. Not every choice I make and every decision I make goes over well with my staff, right? Having to like explain it, but here's what I've learned. If a little bit tidbit. If you're honest and transparent with your team about the choices and the decisions and the why you're making those choices, even if it's not a popular choice, you'll get support, right? And you asked about boards. I also think the role of boards are incredibly important. And I have been blessed with an incredible board, right? And that board that I have now that I feel really supports me takes time to build. Just like you as an organizational leader have to build culture with your team and staff and relationship and be vulnerable and transparent and make, difficult choices and be unapologetic, you have to do that with your board as well. That is part of your community and the structure around you as a leader that is required. And so for me, I feel blessed to have a strong board of movement leaders, women of color, predominantly women of color on my board that gets it and have my back. And I can't tell you how critical that is to leadership, is to have a board that got your back, right?
That's beautiful. That it just like it hits me. It hits me really deeply. I want to come to you, Anathea, to talk about your journey as a queer Indigenous woman in the political landscape. It's both inspiring and I am sure really complex. I would love to hear a little bit about how you navigate the intersections of your identities with, right, the role of being a leader.
These are softballs, aren't they? Yeah, I mean, I think like ultimately I'll start where I'm at now is that I am enough. And in that journey of kind of finding my voice and navigating those intersections has been a really challenging and beautiful journey. But like ultimately it was the experience of growing up between Texas and the reservation. So in Texas being too brown and nobody had ever like really interacted with Indigenous people. And so constantly facing that sort of kind of like lens and like scrutiny of like who we are and why we're still here, and then going back to the reservations and reservation growing up there and being too Texan, and I used to say y'all a lot and I still do, and so had a very heavy Texan accent, and then growing up in spaces where I was the only Native person that people might encounter and like still consistently am the only Native person that people might encounter, and then my experience of coming out in my 40s. And recognizing that like it is a really challenging space for me to be able to navigate the role that I feel like that I have wanted to play in my community, and to be able to have a voice for the Acoma Pueblo people. Our tribal enrollment is around 5,000, so it's very small. We're known as the oldest continuously inhabited community in the United States, and so we are very traditional. We have very strong cultural ceremonies, very spiritual, very deeply connected to my community and my identity. And every single time I am out in the world, it is challenged. It is challenged by my own people who are asking me, like, and kind of like doing a test on like my indigeneity, and really thinking about how I bring that into like and bring it into a political lens and talking about democracy when our relationship with the federal government is deeply problematic, and has in fact wanted to make us extinct and has tried to do away with us on a number of different occasions, just as recent as last year with the SCOTUS vote around ICWA, and really thinking about what it looks like to chip away at sovereignty. And so consistently having to be an educator in spaces when it puts a lot of responsibility on us to start with what we call kind of Indian 101 and reminding people about the history of the United States. And when there used to be a phrase that people said less frequently now, but it still comes up around a nation of immigrants, which is not true. And so thinking about like little things like that are thinking about that erase Indigenous people. And then in the context of my own community around queerness and why I felt such deep shame to come out and the inability to be able to come out until I just felt like I was about to burst. And I couldn't live my life another day without actually feeling the freedom of being free in my own life and in my body and what that looks like. And then being able to like have the words to be able to say that. I stumble through it quite frequently, but when I was most proud of talking about my queerness was with my 9-year-old cousin. And when I told him I was queer, the very next day he wrote on a notebook, the first word was I, the next word was am, and the next word was gay. And he was 9. And in that moment, and I told him because we've always had such a closeness, but in that moment, in moments like that, I am reminded why it's so important to be able to have this voice, my particular voice in spaces, and what that looks like to be able to create more space for more Indigenous people to talk about their own journeys in spaces that looks windy and it's all over the board and it's not always a straight line. For some people, it feels like a very straight line and they know exactly who they are and where they've come from, but that's not the case for most people, Indigenous or not. And so creating space for people to be able to be human beings in this like universe, all navigating towards a space that is like ideally going to be full of love and joy and liberation for everyone, and what that looks like. But all of that is woven through every single breath of every moment of how that you're kind of holding and navigating all of these different experiences, which has just been a really beautiful and hard experience, but being able to Karundi said earlier, like being able to be vulnerable, being able to have some compassion for myself and for the people who are also going through their own journeys, allows for our collective, I guess, unique experience to be accepted, and for us to kind of just have some awareness around navigating through these judgments that we would have previously had. I think that the beauty of having access to social media and so much information and access to everything on the internet is being able to explore so much and being able to like see and witness the beauty of how people are living their beautiful lives and what that looks like for like how it's painting a picture for our future. And when we think about what that North Star looks like and how we get there through political advocacy and democracy in order to be able to like say the why at every single point is why we are doing this, why we are doing this, why we are doing this, and why we are showing up every single day, like through all of the things, to be able to know that like there is a very bright future in front of us through this really dark time.
Ooh, Ashe. Thank you so much for that, Anathea. I really appreciate everything you named there. And we are, in case it like has not been said enough, we are all so very grateful for your voice, truly and deeply. Chris, I want to come to you now. So listen, there's something about you that meant it could not just be business as usual when it comes to ballot initiatives. Part of it might be your background as a Venezuelan American, but there's something deep. There's something deep that has, driven you to lead BISC in a way that is just transformative. I'd love to hear a little bit about how your identity, how your background, right, has created your approach to how you lead this powerful organization.
Big hearts over there, Jen. Yay. I love the new integration in AI is good for something. So much love, Jen. And God, this is such a beautiful and delicious conversation. And so much of what you just said, Anathea, was deeply resonant with me. And what I ground myself is my leadership mantra, which is I was born worthy of being seen and heard. Because that is not how I have felt most of my life. I often describe myself as someone ni de aquí ni de allá, neither from here or there. someone who is between worlds, someone who doesn't fit nicely in little boxes, who has been told on more than occasion they're not enough, never brown enough to be brown, never white enough to be white, never queer enough. Like, that's like what I've heard my entire life. Not immigrant, even though I wasn't born in this country, right? And Anathea, thank you so much for reminding me of what it means to be an immigrant in the context of the United States as well. And I know that's something true for Karundi as well. And so ultimately, to what both Anathea and Karundi have named of leading with vulnerability, and from my role at BISC, or what I've been leading us towards, is creating a place of belonging for all of us. And because so many of us, especially queer folks, especially women of color and just people of color, especially as a Black woman for Karundi, especially as an Indigenous woman, Karundi and Jen, and especially for Anathea as an Indigenous person, for Anathea, nothing in this world has ever fit us perfectly, right? Because they are constructed in colonialism, patriarchy, white supremacy, and, right? And so, when I came to BISC, was really thinking about, through this tool that is most directly closest to the people's ability to make decisions for their lives, how do we create a place of belonging for folks and give them the power and the agency to make decisions in their lives, still recognizing that the institution still exists, right? That our democracy is so far from perfect and was intentionally built to exclude all the four of us. That is what I've been driving us towards, and that is so rooted in my identity and how I've lived the world and walked the space, right? And so for me, it has been like being very clear, if we have this ability through ballot measures to create that direct action and change, then it is imperative that the people who are most directly impacted by those policy outcomes have to be a part of the decision-making table, because that is not the way it has been for the over 120 years that ballot measures have existed, when that is actually the reason they were created, right? And the own racist history of ballot measure, of intentionally excluding the South with the largest Black population and formerly enslaved people, right? Like intentional, right? State legislatures did not bring ballot measures to the South. So all of that has been about just really making sure that what is a political tool and has become a political tool is centered in the people who have not felt like they belong in this world, in this country, in our democracy, giving them a space to have a voice and have the power and drive that change, and being very clear, if we are going to get to that equitable, just world that we deserve, then we have to disrupt race, power, and privilege every step of the way, and approach this to what Karundi said, from a 365 days organizing and a very holistic approach to this. It's not just the policy. It's not just winning on election day. It's every step before and every step after that we have to create that sense of belonging and being very intentional of how we're doing the work. It's not just, part of our mantra at BISC, it's not just if we win, it's how we win that builds power. And we have had to be very clear of what that looks like in order to use this tool, and in many ways, and there's a lot of work still to be done to liberate this tool, to give it back into the hands of the people. And all of that is so driven by by my experience as a human being, who's never, and the world has told her she is not enough. And now at 42, I can unapologetically say is no, I was born worthy to be seen and heard and take space.
Absolutely. No, yes, you were. And again, you see the powerful transformative nature of leadership like yours, Chris, because we're seeing ballot initiatives across the country win on issues that, our people are most impacted by, but that at other levels of power, whether it's the state legislatures or the federal government, right, we have people who are governing outside of the will and the interests of the people. And it's the visionary work that you had that said we can actually create ballot initiatives that are rooted in equity and expanding freedom and democracy, and our folks will flock to turn out and support them. And that theory of change is proving itself right over and over and over again across the country. So yes to all of that. I can't believe that we are actually narrowing in on time together. I really feel like, dang, I could have this conversation for a couple more hours, but I know that y'all can't because y'all have big things to do. I want to ask a question about our teams, right? We are leaders, but we're leaders with teams of people who are helping accomplish these missions and visions every single day. And staff burnout and the trauma they experience, both because they're directly impacted and because they're working in fields where it's really acute. The suffering people are going through in this world is really acute to them. So that's real for them, right? How do you support your team's well-being while maintaining that focus on your North Star, as all of you have described so eloquently? And Karundi, can I come to you first on that?
Absolutely. I think this is a critical question. I'm going to refer to, we did a national survey as Repower about 2 years ago, to survey of organizers and asking just to have a sense of and have the finger on our pulse of what our organizers are needing right now, BIPOC organizers specifically. And burnout was the number one thing they noted that is the threat of the movement. And I want to say it that way because I want it to resonate. Burning out our people, the people that we're relying on to win, and I'm talking about staff, organizers, leaders, all of us, the folks that are essential to our ability to win are burning out. They're leaving the field, they're leaving the movement, and we as a movement and a collective haven't figured out how to address this in a way, address this at all, but address it in a holistic way. So I'll start with my staff because I think of Repower as a really small microcosm of a reflection of all of us and the movement and where we are. We have a multiracial staff, predominantly BIPOC staff. And, we started with what was the moment, I think you asked a question about what was the moment that transformed our leadership. And for me, it was watching George Floyd being murdered in front of all of us. And I remember walking in and our team, and it hit extra close to home for us as an organization because it happened maybe a block or two from our office in Minnesota, right? So for my staff and my team that was in Minnesota, it really hit home for them. And I remember thinking about how do I rise to the occasion in this moment to take care of all of them, both our BIPOC staff and our white staff who are needing moments. And some of those, navigating some of that, how we meet their needs separately can be tricky. But I remember that moment and I thought about how we treated our staff then and how we've carried along our culture here and our policies, etc. It's all around how do we take care of our people and try to help them maintain and not get burnt out. So organizationally, we have very flexible PTO policy, frankly. So I'm going to talk about the policy side and the other side. We have flexible PTO policy that allows our folks to take space when they need to. And we're very gracious about their ability to take space without questioning, right? If people need to tap out, go ahead and tap out so you can fill up and come back to what you need. So on a policy side, incredibly flexible and generous PTO policies. And so we look at our HR manual and do all the things, right? Giving people space and grace. But it's also how do we pause in the moment of crisis. So our staff, we all watch, our world is at war right now. Our world is at war, and we're watching the violence and the trauma. And so being able to pause in those moments too, to tell our team, take a day. Here's some resources. One of the things we did this year with Repower was we gave mental health stipends to folks to go ahead and create some space to talk to a therapist, et cetera, because the other role that we play as leaders is folks want to be able to talk to us, right? Folks want to be able to bring what is going on with them to us, and we want to make the space to do that, but we're not professionals, right? And to Chris's point, we got to take care of ourselves too, right? So how do we thread the line of holding space, grace, bringing folks, knowing that they come to us, creating a safe space within the organization where conversations can happen, and realizing that we're not expert and sometimes our staff needs more. So things like the PTO policy, giving people mental health stipends, are ways that we've taken care of our staff. I know the other day we just sent a whole bunch of people Grubhub gift cards to go get themselves some breakfast and like create space for one-on-ones. So there's a lot of ways. We even have water coolers, y'all. Drop in water coolers on a Friday to have conversation. And we also, the last thing I'll say real quick is we also need to recognize that doing this work is hard, and we're doing it in a moment where it's difficult, and people need joy. People need to remember. I remember a coach said to me, the thing you're trying to fight for, the world you're trying to build for others, you need to be able to participate in that too. I want to feel joy. My staff wants to feel joy in moments of hard times. So we also create space within the organization for joy. And my people are funny, y'all, right? Like we try to laugh at every freaking staff meeting, right? So how do we also balance the need to take care of ourselves outside of the organization, our role to take care of our people, and also finding time for freaking joy? Because without that, yes, we are going to lose the most precious resource we have, which is our people.
Thank you, Karundi. Anathea, can I come to you next?
Sure. So thank you so much for that, Karundi. Ours is also time. One of the things that we recognized is that people weren't taking time off, and that we have such an incredible team, and they all want to show up for each other. So I created collective time that we all take off. So now we've institutionalized spring break, which is 1 full year in the spring. So that will come up in the end of March for us this coming year in 2024. And then we do a fall break, and we do summer Fridays for 3 months out of the summer. And then 3 additional weeks on top of that for people to take at a time that works for them. But that was it was incredibly important for us to do a collective pause. We've also created space, and after the conversations this year and talking a nod towards what I was saying, constantly listening and having a tap on the energy of your team. We're very lucky because we're a really small team right now, so we're able to have more direct contact with a few people. There's 8 full-time folks. Is really kind of listening to what is coming up, and what was coming up throughout the year was the inability to be able to do the work. Is that we are moving through a number of conversations and calls and meetings and trips and travel and conferences and convenings and all of those things. Is that how are you actually going to do database? How are you actually going to get your files right? And so we created an admin week this past in December, which we will now create 2 of them in 2024. And so every single year we're what is working, what isn't working, and then doing some adjustments to be able to meet that. And the other thing that we do is what I mentioned at the top of every staff meeting, we create space just to talk. And so this is we have a silly kind of icebreaker question, but it often goes into conversations of, well, this was the memory that I had with my mom and she's no longer with us. And so we are getting to know our team and really what we're carrying. And then also we do once a month, we do team coffees. And so we have one person who just finds a lot of joy in finding an activity for us. So we created wreaths one month, and we all built them together while we listened to music and chit chatted. Recently, we just did actually this snowflake that's right behind me. We all made snowflakes, and so we get to kind of understand the inner workings of everyone. And some people are super intense about how they're building their snowflakes, and other people are I'm done. I'm just going to sit here and chit chat. And so you kind of just get an idea of like who you're working with and like what they are bringing into spaces and how they are like how they grew up. And so that is like the way that we think of how we get to know kind of like operating manuals is like how we talk about it, like how we work, how like we're motivated, what are the things that we find joy in, and being able to have some time that is required for everybody to take some rest. And so it doesn't mean that like everybody has to, and like, which we will always kind of like make some adjustments as people are going on vacations. But some of the pieces is making sure that everybody is off. So we are letting our funders know, we are letting our community know that we will get back to you, and we honor that for each other, which is really special and incredibly important. So it's just been, and making sure that like it's like around like valuing our time and making sure that we are honoring that and respecting that for each other. And so we do the best of our ability. Obviously, I'm excluded in that in some instances because I'm the ED of the organization, but for the most part, it is respected across the board as like a mandatory way of taking care of each other. And we talk about it openly around reciprocity and our responsibility towards each other as a team, which is just something that everyone has been really receptive of, and I'm deeply grateful for it. The last thing that I will name that is always something that comes up is that we have we spend a lot of time, money, and energy on offboarding people. And so it is really thinking through the care of people moving through the organization, is that our community is small. So if it's going to require professional coaching, they might not be the right fit for the organization, but it does not mean that they're not going to find their place in the world. And so we have done like kind of like after they've left, we've offered professional coaching. We offer like a number of different advising sessions, a number of different opportunities, because we are all still, we firmly believe, interconnected, and we have a responsibility to care for each other. So that does not mean that ends with their relationship to advance. It continues in perpetuity, ideally. And we want to be able to count on those people out in the world as well. So it is a responsibility that we don't take lightly once you are a part of the family as the staff of the organization, or an advisor or within our community. And so that is all of those relationships are deeply valued.
It is beautiful. Chris, I'm going to come to you now. What are you?
I'll be super quick. God, Anathea, like I feel like I want to learn so much from you, because I'm like, I want to do some of those things too. And I'll be honest, as we have grown as an organization, when we're a staff of 6 or 8 and now we're 18, maybe 20, in the new year, many of those things have become increasingly more difficult. Especially, so much of my staff was hired when I became ED, and so it's just been harder. I will be very honest about how it's been difficult, especially from the hiring of folks within the pandemic and on. It's become more difficult. I just want to plus one on the importance of collective time off. I noticed the same thing. We have a summer break. We take almost 2 weeks. Well, next year we'll definitely take 2 full weeks at the end of the winter. We have like these momentary pauses, like after our conference, where I'm like, okay, we've worked really hard. So like that, but that collective rest, one different way we do it is at least one focus Friday a month, where no emailing each other, no slacking each other internally, externally. It is a Friday to focus on the work, just get the work done. Now, what you do on your own time, but we're not doing it. We're not doing all staff emails. We're not doing all staff Slacks. It's like, go ahead, have that quiet day to work. And like giving folks the permission to do that, I think has been really important, which, we saw during the pandemic when we were like and we're still sometimes in Zoom after Zoom after Zoom after Zoom. And then one fun thing that we've started now, like to the joy part that Karundi talked about, we just had our 2nd annual Biskies Award, our staff awards, where we celebrate each other, and like each person has a different person, and we give each other an award, and it's fun, it's hilarious. We get to see each other's creativity. We give staff a stipend to create their awards, and it's just such a beautiful way to end the new year and celebrate each other, which I think is so important for us to do in this work is to celebrate each other and for us to see as peers within an organization, hey, I see you and I see your excellence in this way, I think has been really a fun thing that we started last year and did again this year. And it's so much fun, and there's just so much laughter and yeah, those are just two different examples that I think are just so incredibly important.
Aw, I love that. The Bisky Awards. So cute. Well, folks, unfortunately for me, because I could really literally do this all day, but I am excited because I get to see Karundi later and Chris tomorrow, so this will be okay. I'll survive. I just want to really thank y'all. As we close out here, one thing I would really love to do is just ask, what support is needed for leaders across the ecosystem right now? Right? You all are meeting this moment. You're exceeding expectations to meet this moment, but what do y'all need?
I'll jump in here really quickly. I would say wellness grants. One of the things that has been really challenging is for us to be able to find grants that offer us the ability to actually do something for wellness for our team. It is money that we can dedicate internally, but to be able to have access to spaces and places that will allow us to offer massages, to be able to have some sort of activity that they wouldn't otherwise do, to just be able to offer, even if it is mental health and it is therapy and it is something else, or coaching or something else that allows us the ability to have some freedom and flexibility to take care of our team that is dedicated for that, would be really incredible.
I'll definitely plus that. And I have a hard time answering that question in terms of what do you need. And a funder asked me this question and I struggled, but when I finally came up with it, I thought, I just need some space. I need some spaciousness. Can I get a grant to just go up to Shenandoah Valley real quick and rent out a cabin so I could just be there by myself for a week, right? You're leading, you're moving through crisis. And I think the thing I yearn for is space. And I think specifically space to strategize, space to think about my vision, right? Getting out of the day to day. So I realized that's the thing I need. And as a mom leader, which I'm proud of with a little 5-year-old, I have several full-time jobs, right? And that space, the spaciousness and time away and time to yourself is incredibly critical. So I plus one on the wellness grant, and I would love some spaciousness in this moment.
Chris, take us home.
Plus all of that. I think the one that I've been struggling with and I know both Karundi and Anathea will understand, and Jen, when you were at CPD, Center for Popular Democracy, is yes, spaciousness to dream and think and vision and just take a step out and get out of it, and dedicated money for wellness, because there's so many things I want to offer to my staff, and I'm I don't have the money to do it. But it's also I think what we need as leaders is just some unfettered money to help with some of the organizational development work. How do we restructure? How do we do growth in a very smart way? These are just really tactical, practical things that we need as EDs that I have not had, the time or the space and the money, just really to work on that, big organizational development with that, to allow us to move to the next level. That's just something direct that I just think we all as EDs, I can ask that of a funder, but sometimes the tools and resources aren't there, and I know that Ford and others have been really thinking about this thoughtfully, but just really dedicated money to some of this organizational development stuff, and the support to do that is just so critical.
Well, I'm glad you said it, because I was certainly about to say it if you didn't. Absolutely. That is probably my biggest wish for all of you, all of the leaders across our ecosystem in 2024, is that you get to spend your time executing the programmatic work that is changing the world and not having to continue to, request trickle down resources from folks who are well aware of the impact that you make. So, Karundi, Anathea, Chris, thank you so much for your profound and inspiring insights and stories. And a big thank you to everybody who watches or downloads or listens to this conversation on Meeting the Leadership Moment. It's important for us to remember that leadership is not just about facing challenges. It's really about transforming those challenges into opportunities for growth, for impact, for resilience and sustainability. So let's continue to lead with purpose, resilience, heart, and as Chris said, I think let's keep that joy in the work every single day. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Take care.